First tonight, the marathon legal battle involving the Wikileaks founder Julian Assange appears to be coming to an end. He's reached a plea deal that ends his fight against extradition to the US, which accuses him of leaking a huge quantity of classified defense documents 14 years ago. He's been released from prison in Britain and is on his way to a remote US territory in the Pacific, the Northern Mariana Islands, where the legal formalities will be completed. Julian Assange was wanted by the United States for publishing hundreds of thousands of secret US military documents and diplomatic cables on Wikileaks in 2010. The leaks made him a hero to free speech campaigners, but infuriated the US authorities, who said he'd put lives at risk and endangered national security. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has welcomed his release.
I think it's important to reiterate this because you don't want to have a narrative at one stage and then a different sort of, a triumphant narrative at another stage. It was not really an issue about Mr. Assange. If you asked me, do I think what he did was morally correct? No, it wasn't. But the issue for me is extraterritoriality. This was an Australian citizen. He was not a citizen of the United States. He was not in the United States when this felony, as what they said, was created. He did not steal the information. From what I read, and of course we're all very new to this, it's still a plea deal on a felony. As a plea deal on a felony, he has to be heard on the soil of the United States, and I read that may be Saipan Island. So we just got to be still cautious on how this proceeds because the end has not arrived.
Just to start with, what a great day. I didn't think we'd get to this point so quickly. We're always hopeful, but it's just great news today to see those images of Julian getting on the plane, going to an island not many of us have heard of, but I think we're going to hear a lot more of in coming days and weeks, and he'll be looking forward to, at some point soon, being reunited with his wife Stella and his 2 children. So great stuff.
Well, for more on this, let's cross live to London and speak with Arise special correspondent John Cookson. Good to see you, John. So Julian Assange, a hero of free speech to some and to others, a villain who endangered the lives of soldiers around the world by exposing secrets about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now he's been freed from prison in the UK. Explain the background to this story.
Hey Charles, good to see you. You know, when I read this story this morning that Julian Assange had been freed, I nearly fell out of bed, Charles. It's absolutely extraordinary. What an incredible tale this is, that he has now been freed, and at this hour he's on his way to Saipan, which is the capital of those islands you mentioned, the Mariana Islands. No, I've never heard of them either, Charles. But apparently he's due in court at around midnight our time, that's UK time and Nigerian time, 9 a.m. in Saipan. And if the director can find it, I got the legal document issued by the American DOJ to the judge in Saipan, telling him how things are going to proceed, that in fact Assange is going to plead guilty to one charge of espionage. He was originally proposed to be charged with 17 charges of espionage, which would, if he'd been extradited to the United States, would put him in jail for life. This time, with the plea deal that he's done with the DOJ, he's already served 5 years in Belmarsh Jail here in London, from where he walked yesterday to a private jet at Stansted Airport and disappeared. Sorry about that. Disappeared to Mariana Islands, and as I say, that hearing due in about 6 hours from now. His wife Stella saying that she's elated and emotional, and I think that's probably the understatement. This of course has to be seen through the prism of the American presidential election coming up in November, and the Biden White House has yet to explain itself, because there were years of high court battles in London by the Americans to actually get him extradited from London to face a jury in America, but that never happened, and maybe it's because the Americans didn't want to be humiliated yet again with another court battle lost in London, but we'll have to wait and hear from Washington in due course. Some people are speculating that if things had dragged on a little bit more, that the Trump White House might have a different perspective on what Assange did, although Trump has in the past said that he would consider freeing Julian Assange. So to go back to your first point, it's an incredible step forward, you could say, for the freedom of speech and the journalistic concept of freedom of speech, which of course is precious in America and of this country. But there's one perhaps dark side to all of this, Charles. He's pleaded guilty to espionage for having possession of secret documents. Now, journalists all over the world, including myself in the past, have had access to secret documents. Does this mean that this is a precedent now? That the DOJ could conceivably come after any journalist who has possession of secret documents and publicises them. So there's a possible dark side to all of this. And the other, of course, is the alleged danger that Assange put to the lives of all those mentioned in those hundreds of thousands of documents that were released from the 2010 onwards. So as Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, said, these are early days. He's not free yet. It depends on how this court hearing goes. And Albanese, in fact, has put a lot of pressure on the Biden White House to free Assange, and now they've gone ahead and done that. But the Washington still has to give a full explanation, Charles.
Absolutely, and as you said, John, an extraordinary story. I'm glad we had the opportunity to be able to bear witness to it, especially with you up there. But of course, I can see Westminster behind you, so let's turn to British politics as the election draws ever nearer. Just tell us more about that growing scandal about the Conservative Party's campaign director who's being investigated in connection with an alleged bet relating to the timing of the election. And that scandal isn't going away, is it? I hope John can hear me.
Out of London tonight is the fact that, you wouldn't have thought Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and Conservative government's troubles could get much worse. Well, they have over this alleged gambling scandal that has hit the party. The background to all of this is that Rishi Sunak was expected to call a general election in September, October of this year, or even November, and possibly even January of next year. And he shocked the political world by calling an election in July. And it seems that those close to him, and indeed some not too close to him, got wind of that, and they placed bets on when the general election would take place in July, and possibly made a good deal of money by that. Now the Gambling Commission and indeed possibly the police now are investigating all of this because those in the firing line are senior Conservative officials, and two of them were standing in the forthcoming general election. That's Laura Saunders and Craig Williams, who allegedly put bets on the date of the general election. They've now been kicked out of the party. They can still stand as MPs in the constituency, even though they've lost the Conservative whip, but they have to stand as independents. Other officials, Conservative officials being investigated are Tony Lee, Sunak's campaign director, Nick Mason, his data chief. And tonight, Charles, in a developing story, one policeman has already been arrested in connection with this alleged bribing scandal, but now 5 more policemen are thought to have placed bets illegally. So this is a story that's not going to go away. It's not good for Rishi Sunak's campaign, coming as it does just a week or so before a general election, and reinforces the idea in people's mind in this country that the Conservative Party is a little bit sleazy. And indeed, Sunak's Conservative Party is 20% behind Labour tonight in the opinion polls.
And John, I don't know
Charles,
if you can hear
so I'm
me.
going to throw back to you from London and say good night.
Right, okay, I think we've lost John, the comms there, but I mean, we got the most of what he was, well, we got all he was saying there, he just couldn't hear me. But the other point I was going to raise with him, which is, which we were hopefully going to get some steer on from him, is the fact of the opinion polls in Britain that seem to be suggesting that Nigel Farage, who is the leader of the Reform Party, is ahead of the Conservatives. And I was going to find out from him what reaction there might be from Rishi Sunak and his deputies, whether or not, as it's been suggested, they're terrified, because it sounds like Mr. Farage will split the votes on the right of British politics, which would be very sort of unpleasant, if not catastrophic, for the Conservatives. And also, of course, to find out if Nigel Farage and his Reform Party and their surge in the polls, what sort of impact that might have for the Labour Party, who are streaking ahead at the moment, and whether it's going to be a threat to them at all in this election. But alas, we don't seem to have John Cookson there. So let's move on.